What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the yugioh TCG deck profile. Now, if you saw my last video on Mitsurugi, you will know that this week I'm only going to be doing deck profiles, no actual gameplay of the decks this week. That is because I am preparing for a regional, so I am a little bit constrained on time, but I wanted to bring you one of my favorite decks of all time, that being Phantom Knight. Now, is Phantom Knight one of the best decks right now? Most definitely not. Is it a competent deck? Yeah, for the most part. Is it able to compete with the decks that are the best right now? If it goes first, yes. If it goes second, sometimes. Like, it's a pretty alright strategy. Like, just being upfront, like, it's pretty damn good. But, however, it has not quite received any modernized support to really push it over the edge that most modern decks have. There's no Ryzeal X, there's no Malice White Binder, nothing like that. Just for the most part, fair and honest Yu-Gi-Oh, which makes it fall a little behind the curve. But I wanted to still bring it to you today, so here we have Phantom Knight. So in this deck, we are running 60 cards because I wanted to run That Grass Looks Greener, but primarily because I wanted to be able to run at least 12 hand traps, and in order to do so, and play Phantom Knight at the same time, I do have to go above 40. I also did want to play non-engine cards like Thrust, Talons, Foolish Burial, and Droplet. However, again, that's going to push the deck even more above 40, pushing it towards the 50 range. And once we hit that 50 range, we are a graveyard deck, so there is an argument to be playing just more extenders and just play That Grass Looks Greener because we are on Triple Tactics Thrust, and our deck does have a weakness to Bystials and Nibiru. So that's enough yapping about the overall deck profile. Let's start with the card by card. Starting off with our starters. We're on triple copies of Speedroid Terratop and one copy of Takatomborg. I put all of our Garnets in right here in the last 4 slots of the deck. These are cards we do not want to be drawing under any circumstance for the most part. All of these cards do have some use while they are in our hand. For example, Takatomborg, since if we control a wind monster, we can special summon this from our hand. So if you control a monster like our Terratop, we can special it for free. Or if we just draw our Takatomborg and no Terratop, we can go into a Leviair the Sea Dragon, which is a win to get it out of our hand. Same goes with our Burning Abysses, Seer, and Graph, which pair with our Tour Guide from the Underworld, which is one of our best starters in the entire strategy, because these cards basically blow themselves up if we control anything other than BA, or if we can't even summon them if we have back row. However, of course, since we are playing Tour Guide and PK, we are playing Cherubini, so if we can make a Cherubini and we have a BA in our hand, they're just freebie extenders. Same thing goes with Phantom Knight's Wing. We're just a freebie extender in the graveyard, and it's just another copy of Phantom Knight's Fogblade in the graveyard for the most part. So we're also on triple copies of Tour Guide, again, to special summon out Graph ideally, and then link off Graph and Tour Guide for a Cherubini, triggering the Graph, which will special summon a Burning Abyss from deck, special summoning Seer, and allowing us to go Cherubini and Seer to go into a Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche, and then Seer has the effect where if it's sent to the graveyard, we can special summon a Burning Abyss from our graveyard, bringing back our Cherubini, which will not blow itself up unlike the rest of the BAs. Tour Guide is also, of course, the best starter in almost any strategy, if it can resolve, of course, because it just generates so much advantage. Even if we draw a Tour Guide later in the game, like turn 2 and beyond, and we've already used our BAs, Tour Guide can grab another copy of herself just to go into a quick rank 3. For our PKs, we're on triple copies of Torrent Scale Ignition Effect, allowing us to discard a card to Foolish Burial any Phantom Knight's card from our deck to the graveyard except for itself. And if another Phantom Knight card in our graveyard is banished while this card's in our graveyard, we can special summon it, but banish when it leaves the field. We're on triple copies of Boots. If we control a Phantom Knight's monster, we can just freebie special it, and we can banish it from the graveyard as an Ignition Speed effect in order to add a Phantom Knight spell or trap from our deck to our hand. We're also on double copies of Cloak. On board, it has an ignition effect where if it's an attack position, we can trigger a dark monster on field, change this card to defense position, and that monster gains 800 attack and defense up to the end of your opponent's next turn. And we can banish it from our graveyard ignition effect to add the Phantom Knight card from our deck to our hand, except for Ancient Cloak. Typically, that's going to be any Phantom Knight monster. However, it does also apply to Phantom Knight trap cards that will special summon themselves as monsters, in which case we are playing one copy, being Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine. We're also on one copy of Ragged Gloves. A Dark Xyz monster that was summoned using this card on field as material will gain the effect where it'll be a mandatory effect on the summon of the Xyz monster to gain 1000 attack. That does activate, so it can potentially leave you vulnerable to cards like Ghost Ogre. but it also has the effect where we can banish this card from our graveyard to just send a different Phantom Knights card from our deck to the graveyard. It's a really great middle piece where if you want to trigger a card like Torrent Scales but don't want to immediately activate a card like Boots or Cloak, we can send our gloves to do that. We're also on one copy of Phantom Knights of Stained Greaves. If this card's in our hand and a Phantom Knight monster is special summoned to our field, we can special summon this card and then increase the level by this card by 1. That is, it can increase it, so we do not have to if we want to use it for Xyz plays, specifically for Xyz 3s. And then we can banish this card from our graveyard to special summon a Phantom Knights card from our hand, except for itself. And then we can also increase that levels by 1 if we would like to. Same effect if it special summons itself, increase the level if we want to. If it special summons another card, we can increase that level if you would like to. For Phantom Knight spell traps, we're on triple copies of Fogblade. It's just Fiendish Chain, but way, way better. One copy of Shade Brigade, which is a freebie extender if we have no traps in our graveyard. And one copy of Wings, which is Lingering Protection, Lingering Attack Gain, and it is Reborn in the graveyard, which Fogblade is also. For our extenders, we're on triple copies of Kagamucha Knight. The main card that we want to be pairing Kagamucha Knight is Tour Guide to prevent Tour Guide from getting ashed, because how it would work is when Kagamucha Knight reads when a level 3 monster is normal summoned, we can special summon this card from our hand. That is a trigger effect, so if we go normal summon Tour Guides, but we can go Tour Guide effect, Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, Kagamucha Knight to special summon. Now, that does mean our Tour Guide can still get Effect Veilered and Impermed, of course. However, it does mean it cannot get Ash Blossom, or they can still use Dominus Impulse, but not on our Tour Guide, but on our Kagamucha Knight. We're also on dangers of Double Jackalope and Triple Tsuchinoko now that they have been completely unlimited. We're not on Triple Jackalope because Tsuchinoko is just generally a little bit better since it doesn't summon from deck, so it doesn't trigger something like a Fua Loss. However, we still are trying to get those 3s on board as much as possible, as well as have really great discard targets for our Phantom Knight of Torn Scales. For other freebie extenders, we're on 1 Wielder and 1 Tracker, as well as double copies of Emergency Teleport to get the Wielder and the Tracker. We're not on Ghost Ogre in this list because we are on 60 cards, so we're not really expecting to, if we are seeing Emergency Teleport, to seeing both of our Psychics in our hand. For our non-engine, we're on triple copies of Thrust, 1 copy of Talents as a Thrust target, 1 copy of That Grass as a Thrust target, Rhoda, since we are a warrior-based strategy, although the main warrior we typically are going to be adding from our deck to our hand with Rhoda is, funny enough, Kagamucha Knight. Triple copies of Droplet for negation, as well as Droplet is actually insane in this strategy specifically, because very frequently you're able to discard all 3 types of cards in order to basically prevent our opponent from activating anything in response to Droplet. And then for hand traps, we're on triple copies of Impulse, triple copies of Ash Blossom, 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence, triple copies of Fua Loss, triple copies of Perulia, and then of course the Garnets that I previously mentioned, being 1 Takatomborg, 1 Seer, 1 Graph, and 1 Phantom Knight's Wing. That's another reason we're on 60 cards, is to limit the chance of us drawing multiple copies of any given Garnet, or rather multiple copies of Garnets in conjunction. We're also on, of course, the Dominus Impulse. I'm not going to just breeze past this. We're on no copies of Light, Earths, and Winds that we really need to activate. We, of course, are on Winds of Leviair and Speedroid Terratop. However, if we are going Dominus Impulse, typically it's going to be on our turn 1, in which case we can just use our Terratop as discard fodder for something like our Torrent Scale, so there was no need to actually activate it, as well as the effect that we can still just summon it from our hand, like Dominus Impulse says we can't activate the effects of Lights, Earths, and Winds, but Speedroid Terratop does not activate in order to special summon itself. And also, we can just not go into Leviair. If we're going second, typically Leviair isn't the correct move anyway, so it doesn't really hurt us too bad, to be completely honest. In our extra deck, we're on 1 copy of Cherubini, the best Phantom Knight Link 2 in the entire game, 1 copy of IP Masquerena, 2 copies of SP Little Knight. This deck is very strong into grind games, like incredibly strong into grind games, so we do want to make sure our extract reflects that, with 2 copies of SP This Little Knight, 1 copy of Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, 1 copy of Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche. This is the card that's always going to get negated with Ash, Imperm, Veiler, etc., etc. So this is the main card that if you are playing against Phantom Knight that you're most likely going to be hitting, although there are a lot of lines where we don't even need Rusty Bardiche to resolve. Rusty reads during our main phase ignition effect, we can send a Phantom Knight's monster from our deck to the graveyard and then send a Phantom Knight spell or trap directly from our deck to our field. And if a Dark Xyz monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, while this monster is face up on the field, we can target 1 card on the field and destroy it, and each effect is a hard once per turn. Now, that effect does not especially relate to explicitly Xyz summoning. It is if a Dark Xyz is special summoned to a zone it points to, meaning during our opponent's turn, if we have something like a Phantom Knights of Fogblade and a Phantom Knights of Breaksword in our graveyard, we can go Fogblade as a quick effect, since it is a quick effect in graveyard, since it is a trap, to bring back our Phantom Knights of Breaksword to a zone that Barniche points to in order to just quick effect pop a card on our opponent's side of the field. It is one chain slower than we would really like it to be, but it is still interaction. We're also on one copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World in order to out problematic cards, since this deck is incredibly good at flooding the field with bodies. We're on one copy of Levier in order to recycle our banished Phantom Knight monsters, double copies of Breaksword, which has the effect where we can ignition target a card we control and target a card our opponent controls and destroy both. And then if this card is destroyed, we can target 2 Phantom Knight monsters at the same level in our graveyard and special summon them, but their levels become 1 more. And then we're locked out of special summoning for the rest of our turn except for dark monsters, which is the only restriction on special summoning in this entire deck. So if we're going to be using the Breaksword effect, better make sure we're not going to be wanting to summon our Underworld Goddess or our Levier the Sea Dragon. We're also on one copy of Time Thief Yugioh, since if we make this with a trap, it makes it incredibly powerful, which is what our Shade Brigandine is here for. Typically, Shade Brigandine plus a card like Stained Greaves will make that a really, really great redoer. We're also on other 4s of one Evil Swarm Nightmare. If a card is special summoned to our opponent's side of the field, we can attach a material and Book of Moon it. And that is not a once per turn, so we can activate both of those effects in the exact same turn. So just double Book of Moon is great. And then for OTKs, we're on one copy of Raider's Knight, where it's basically a Phantom Knight. We can attach a material from this card to rank up or down by 1 to a Raid Rapper or an Xyz Dragon Xyz monster, and then it's destroyed during our opponent's next end phase. And then our target for that is going to be, of course, the Breaksword that we previously mentioned, as well as one copy of Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This is our OTK tool, and most opponents don't really see it coming unless they are intimately aware of this card. And this Xyz summon card cannot be destroyed by card effects, immediately getting around our Raider's Knight, popping the card during the end step of the next turn. And this card reads, Ignition effect, we can attach a material from this card. This card gains attack equal to the total original attack of all other monsters on the field. Then if this card is a Dark Xyz monster as material, negate the effects of all other face-up monsters on the field, period. That is, insane. Of course, it's going to negate our own cards, but it's also just the Underworld Goddess on summon effect to just negate everything, which is fantastic for getting over problematic board states like Yubel cards specifically. You don't want them floating, and if we can get a way to pop the Nightmare Pain, we can functionally kill them in one blow as long as we set up our board properly. It also has the effect where after we activate that effect, we can only attack with Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. Although, typically, if we're going into this, we know we're going to be able to do a kill shot with just this one card, so it's not too big of a deal. Then our last card in our extra deck is a little bit of a flex spot, to be completely honest. This card could realistically be anything you really want. Same with the SP Little Knight, so if you did want to go into something like Utopic Draco Future, you totally could, but of course that is a light monster, so that does go against our Dominus Impulse, which is why I opted to not include it. Now, you might be wondering why you're not including that, but you're including another light monster being Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder, and that's because this card's just a lot more useful than Draco Future, to be completely honest. A lot of the times, if we're going to be needing our AA Zeus Sky Thunder, it means that we have not actually resolved a Dominus Impulse. We're assuming that if we resolve Dominus Impulse, we're not going to need a Zeus. We're stopping them at least to the degree where Zeus isn't going to be a necessary thing, and we can just rely on our Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon to do so. So that's going to be about it for the deck profile. Thank you all so much for watching. If you still are, thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, please stay tuned to the end of all my videos where you get details on the benefits you'll receive from that. But just watching my videos supports me more than enough. So again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye bye.